The morning rush at Cafe Valentino hit like clockwork every weekday at 7:45. Espresso machines screaming, milk frothers hissing, the constant percussion of ceramic mugs meeting saucers while downtown Chicago shook off sleep and demanded caffeine, with the urgency of the truly addicted. I'd been working here for 18 months now, long enough that my hands moved through drink orders without conscious thought. Muscle memory guided me through lattes and cappuccinos and the increasingly complicated custom orders that made me question whether people actually wanted coffee or just liked hearing themselves talk. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. Grande oat milk latte, extra hot, half pump vanilla, half pump hazelnut, with exactly 2 ice cubes dropped in after steaming so it's drinkable immediately, but still technically hot. The woman at the register didn't look up from her phone while reciting this. Coming right up. I forced brightness into my voice, the practiced cheerfulness that customers expected from the girl behind the counter, the one that hid how I'd been awake since 4:30 this morning, finishing a medical terminology assignment that was already 2 days late. My name tag read, Elena, in careful script. Elena Rossi, 24 years old, working full-time at a coffee shop while taking online classes for a pharmacy technician certification I'd been chipping away at for 3 years. The kind of education that promised slightly better pay than minimum wage if I ever actually finished it. The cafe itself occupied a corner building in the Loop, all exposed brick and reclaimed wood, trying hard to feel artisanal despite being part of a small local chain. We served downtown professionals who paid $7 for coffee without blinking, business people who treated baristas like furniture, and the occasional regular who actually remembered our names. I preferred the morning shift, 6 to 2, which meant I could take afternoon classes online and still have evenings theoretically free, though in practice those hours disappeared into studying or picking up extra shifts to cover rent on the studio apartment in Pilsen. I shared with approximately 1 million cockroaches that refused to die despite my best chemical warfare efforts. Oat milk latte for Jessica, I called out, sliding the cup onto the pickup counter. The customer grabbed her drink without acknowledgement and disappeared into the morning chaos. I turned back to the espresso machine, already pulling shots for the next order, when the bell above the door chimed. The cafe went quieter. Not silent. Exactly, conversations continued. The espresso machine still hissed, but the energy shifted. Like atmospheric pressure dropping before a storm, subtle but unmistakable. 3 men entered. The 2 in front moved with practiced awareness, eyes scanning the space with the kind of attention that suggested they were cataloging exits and threats simultaneously. Both wore dark suits that fit too well to be off the rack. Both carried themselves with the particular confidence that came from being very good at violence. But it was the man between them who made my breath catch. Tall, maybe 6 to 2, with dark hair swept back from a face that belonged on Renaissance paintings. Sharp cheekbones, a jaw that could cut glass, and eyes so dark they looked black even in the cafe's bright lighting. He wore a charcoal suit with a black shirt underneath. No tie, the top button undone to reveal a gold chain that caught the light. He moved like water, smooth and deliberate, commanding space without demanding it. The 3 of them approached the counter, and I found myself straightening reflexively, smoothing my apron even though it was already as neat as it was going to get after 2 hours of rush. Good morning, I managed to now keep my voice steady. What can I get started for you? The 2 men flanking him ordered quickly Americano. Black coffee, their voices carrying accents I couldn't quite place. Brooklyn, maybe, or somewhere in New Jersey. Then the man in the center stepped forward, and I caught the scent of expensive cologne mixed with something darker. Not unpleasant. Expensive. The kind of smell that announced wealth before words ever could. Espresso, he said. His voice was low, textured, with an accent that suggested Italian heritage generations back. Doppio. Nothing added. Of course. I rang up the orders, noted names on cups even though I'd remember them regardless. Can I get a name for the order? Marco. One of the bodyguards answered before the main man could respond. Something flickered in those dark eyes' amusement. Maybe, but he didn't correct it. I prepared their drinks with more care than usual, hyper-aware of being observed. The espresso pulled perfectly, rich crema, floating on top. The kind of shot that would taste like dark chocolate and smoke. I handed over the Americano and black coffee first, then the doppio. Thank you, Elena. He'd read my name tag, but the way he said it made my skin prickle with awareness. They claimed a table near the back, positioned where they could see both the entrance and the rest of the cafe. The 2 bodyguards sat flanking, The man called Marco in the center, all of them drinking in silence while the morning chaos continued around them. I tried not to stare, failed repeatedly. "Who is that?" I asked Marcus when he emerged from the back with more milk. Marcus had been working at Café Valentino since it opened 5 years ago. Mid-50s, graying hair, the kind of steady presence that made him the unofficial manager despite technically having the same job title as me. He'd seen everything Chicago's downtown had to offer, good and bad in equal measure. He glanced at the table, then back at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Nobody you want to know." That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're getting. He stocked the milk in the fridge with more force than necessary. "Do your job, be polite, don't ask questions. Understand?" The seriousness in his tone made my stomach clench. "Marcus. Elena." He softened slightly. "Some customers we serve, some customers we don't notice. He's the second kind. Clear?" It wasn't clear, but I nodded anyway. The morning rush continued. I made drinks, took orders, smiled until my face hurt, and tried very hard not to notice the table in the back where 3 men sat with untouched coffee and predatory awareness. They stayed for 40 minutes. When they finally stood to leave, the man called Marco approached the counter, pulled out his wallet, and placed a $100 bill on the counter. "For the excellent espresso. Sir, your total was only $12. Keep it." Not arrogant, just matter of fact. Like $100 tips were. Completely normal. He left before I could protest, his bodyguards falling into formation as they exited into Chicago's morning cold. I stared at the bill, then at Marcus, who'd witnessed the exchange with resignation. "I told you," he said quietly. "Don't ask questions." But questions were all I had. They came back the next morning. Same time, 7:43, like clockwork. Same formation, same table, same orders. And the morning after that, by the 4th day, I had their drinks ready before they reached the counter. Americano, black coffee, doppio espresso. The bodyguards I'd learned their names were Anthony and Sal from overhearing conversations nodded approval. Marco just looked at me with those impossibly dark eyes and said, "You're observant. I remember regulars." I tried to keep my voice professional, neutral. "It's part of the job. Most people don't." He handed over exact change this time, no excessive tip. "They see uniforms, not people. You see people." The compliment shouldn't have warmed me the way it did. This became routine. They'd arrive at 7:43, order drinks I already had prepared, sit at their back table for exactly 40 minutes, then leave. Marco always paid, always tipped generously, though never as extravagantly as that first $100. Always said thank you with my name attached, like he was confirming I existed. I learned things through observation. The way Anthony always sat with his back to the wall. How Sal tracked every person who entered with the kind of attention that suggested training. The fact that Marco never touched his phone during these morning sessions, just sat drinking espresso and watching the cafe with that same calculating awareness his bodyguards employed. He's Mafia. Jen said it during a lull between rushes, 2 weeks after Marco had started coming in. She worked the afternoon shift but had arrived early, caught the tail end of their morning visit. Has to be. Nobody travels with that kind of security, unless they're either incredibly important or incredibly dangerous. You don't know that. But I did know it. Had known it from the first moment Marcus told me not to ask questions. "Elena, look at them. Look at the way other customers react when they're here. People give them space. Nobody sits at adjacent tables even when we're packed. That's not celebrity treatment, that's fear." She wasn't wrong. I'd noticed the same thing. The way the cafe's energy shifted when Marco arrived. How conversations lowered in volume. How people suddenly found reasons to sit farther away from that back table. "Doesn't matter what he is," I said, wiping down the espresso machine with more force than necessary. "He's a customer. I make his coffee. That's it." "Is it?" Jen studied me with uncomfortable intensity. "Because you've been checking the door at 7:40 every morning for a week, and yesterday when he didn't show up, you looked disappointed." I did not. You absolutely did. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. Which is fine. He's gorgeous in that dangerous, probably definitely criminal way. Just be careful. Men like that are complicated. I wanted to argue, to insist I had no interest beyond professional courtesy in a regular customer. But the words stuck in my throat because they'd be lies, and we both knew it. The truth was, I'd started looking forward to 7:43, to the moment when the door would open and Marco would walk in with his tailored suits and his dark eyes and his quiet presence that somehow made the chaotic morning feel more manageable. The truth was, when he'd been absent that one day, no explanation, just empty space where he usually sat, I'd felt the disappointment Jen identified, a hollowness that had no business existing for a customer I barely knew. The truth was dangerous, so I pushed it down, focused on work and classes and the careful balance of survival that had been my life for 3 years. Ever since Dad's accident, since the medical bills that insurance refused to cover completely, since dropping out of traditional college to work full-time while pursuing certification online, I didn't have space in my life for complications, especially not complications that came with bodyguards and unspoken danger and tips that could cover a week's worth of groceries. But the heart doesn't operate on logic, and every morning at 7:43, mine beat a little faster. 3 weeks into this routine, everything changed. It started like every other morning. Rush building. Marcus and I moving through orders with practiced efficiency. The familiar chaos of downtown Chicago caffeinating itself into consciousness. 7:43 arrived. The door opened, but something was wrong. Marco entered with his usual bodyguards, but there was a fourth man with them. Younger, maybe late 20s, wearing an expensive suit that didn't quite fit him the same way the others did. New money trying to look like old money, and missing by inches. They approached the counter, and I started preparing the usual orders on autopilot. "Good morning," I said with practiced brightness. "The usual?" "Yes." Marco's voice carried a note I hadn't heard before. Tension, maybe, or warning. "And whatever he wants," he gestured to the young man, who stepped forward with a smile that made my skin crawl for reasons I couldn't articulate. "Cappuccino," the newcomer said. His accent was different, not Italian-American like the others. Something European. Eastern European, maybe. Extra dry. I made the drinks quickly, efficiently, handed them over with the same professional courtesy I showed every customer. But my hands trembled slightly, placing Marco's doppio on the counter. He noticed. His eyes met mine, held for a moment that stretched too long. Then he nodded once and led his group to the back table. Except today, they didn't sit in the usual formation. Today, the new man sat across from Marco while Anthony and Sal flanked them like sentries. Today, the energy in the cafe didn't just shift, it crystallized into something sharp and dangerous. "Who's the new guy?" I asked Marcus quietly. "None of our business." "Marcus. Elena." He grabbed my arm gently but firmly. "Whatever's happening at that table stays at that table. We're just coffee. That's all we are. Coffee and pastries and professional ignorance. Understand?" I understood. I also understood that the new man's cappuccino sat untouched while he talked with animated gestures that Marco watched with the stillness of a predator deciding whether something was prey or threat. I understood that Anthony's hand kept drifting to his jacket in a way that suggested weapons within easy reach. I understood that something was very, very wrong. 10 minutes into their conversation, the new man stood, excused himself to the bathroom with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He passed the counter, and I caught a whiff of his cologne, sharp, chemical, trying too hard to be expensive. He returned 3 minutes later, sat back down, pushed the cappuccino toward Marco with a gesture that looked friendly but felt calculated. "Try it," he said, voice carrying across the now quiet cafe. "Your barista makes excellent coffee. This one is particularly good." Marco reached for the cup, and I saw it. The discoloration was subtle, barely visible unless you knew what to look for. And I only knew because of the pharmacy technician coursework I'd been drowning in for 3 years. The way compounds interact, how certain toxins present in liquid, the slight cloudiness that shouldn't exist in properly steamed milk. Cappuccinos have 3 layers: espresso, steamed milk, foam. When prepared correctly, the boundaries between these layers are distinct but harmonious. This one looked right at first glance, proper foam to milk ratio, acceptable presentation. But the milk underneath the foam had a faint gray tinge. Not obvious. Not the kind of thing a casual observer would notice. But I'd made thousands of cappuccinos. Knew exactly what color properly steamed milk should be. This was wrong. And Marco's fingers were already on the cup, lifting it toward his mouth. My body moved before my brain caught up. "Don't drink that!" The words tore from my throat loud enough to shatter the cafe's uneasy quiet. Loud enough to make every head turn, every conversation stop. the espresso machine's hiss suddenly deafening in the shocked silence. I was vaulting over the counter, actually vaulting, one hand on the barrier, legs swinging over like I was some kind of action hero instead of a barista who could barely afford rent. My feet hit the floor running. 5 steps to his table. Anthony was already moving, hand inside his jacket, Sal rising from his chair with the kind of speed that confirmed every suspicion about who these men really were. But I was faster, driven by instinct and 3 years of studying how things could kill you if ingested incorrectly. My hand shot out, slapped the cup from Marco's grip with enough force that cappuccino exploded across the table in a spray of milk and espresso, and whatever poison had turned it, that subtle, terrible, gray, the cup hit the floor, shattered. Liquid spreading across tile in patterns that would have been beautiful if they weren't potentially lethal. Silence crashed down like a physical weight. Marco stared at me. Anthony had his gun halfway drawn. Sal was on his feet, positioned to intercept threats. The young man who'd brought the poisoned drink had gone pale, then red, then pale again. And I stood there, chest heaving, hand still extended where I'd struck the cup, finally understanding what I'd just done. I'd just assaulted a customer's drink, in front of witnesses, in a café where I was barely making enough to survive, all because I'd seen discoloration in steamed milk and had let 3 years of pharmaceutical education override common sense. My voice cracked. The milk. It was contaminated. I saw there was discoloration that shouldn't be there. Gray tinge, indicating possible heavy metal introduction or alkaloid suspension. Cappuccinos don't look like that. The compound structure was wrong. I couldn't let you. I was babbling. Knew I was babbling. Couldn't stop. Marco's dark eyes held mine. Then, slowly, he stood. For a terrible moment, I thought he'd be angry. Thought Anthony would finish drawing that weapon. Thought I'd just destroyed my life trying to prevent something that might not even be real. Then Marco looked at the young man across the table. Interesting, he said quietly, voice carrying weight that made the temperature drop 10 degrees. My cappuccino appears to have been tampered with. Care to explain, Dimitri? Dimitri. So that was his name, had already calculated his odds. I watched the math happen behind his eyes. Watched him decide that whatever plan he'd had was now ashes. He ran. Tried to. Anyway. Sal was in his path before. Dimitri made it 2 steps. What happened next occurred too fast to process completely. Movement, impact. Dimitri face down on the cafe floor with Sal's knee in his back and his arms wrenched behind him at angles that made me wince. Call Detective Morrison, Marco said to Anthony, voice still perfectly calm. Like this was business as usual. Tell him we have a situation that requires immediate attention. Attempted poisoning. Multiple witnesses. Then he turned back to me. How did you know? The milk. I couldn't seem to stop shaking. It had discoloration, gray tinge. Properly steamed milk is pure white or cream-colored depending on fat content. That one had compound suspension, indicating foreign material introduction. Basic pharmaceutical recognition from my certification coursework. You're studying pharmacy? Pharmacy technician. Online. I'm not a pharmacist. Just learning compound interactions and pharmaceutical safety protocols, and I've been studying toxicology for the past 3 weeks because there's a test. And his hand touched my shoulder. Gentle, grounding. Breathe, Elena. I breathed. Tried to. Anyway, police arrived 7 minutes later. Not uniformed officers, detectives in suits, who showed Marco the kind of difference that confirmed everything Jen had suspected. They spoke in low voices, examined the spilled cappuccino, took Dimitri into custody with efficiency that suggested this wasn't their first rodeo with situations like this. Detective Morrison, tall, black, carrying himself with the exhausted authority of someone who'd seen too much, pulled me aside for a statement. I told him everything. The order, the bathroom break, the discoloration, the instinctive reaction that had probably saved a life and definitely destroyed my employment prospects. You did the right thing, Morrison said when I finished. Not praise, just fact. Preliminary testing will take a few hours, but based on what you're describing, we're likely looking at heavy metal poisoning, thallium maybe, or arsenic compound. Either way, lethal dose, if consumed. My stomach dropped. He would have died? Painfully. Within hours. You saved his life, Miss Rossi. The weight of that landed on my shoulders like concrete. I'd saved Marco's life. The Mafia man who'd been tipping me generously and drinking my espresso and existing in my peripheral vision for 3 weeks. I'd seen poison and stopped it, and nothing would ever be the same. The cafe closed early that day. Crime scene tape, police interviews, health inspectors who descended like locusts to examine every inch of our equipment despite the poisoning having nothing to do with food safety violations. Marcus sent everyone home around noon with full pay for the day and instructions not to talk to media. Not that media would care much. Attempted poisoning of a private citizen in a coffee shop didn't make headlines in a city where actual shootings happened daily. But I knew better now. Knew that Marco wasn't just a private citizen. Knew that this wasn't random violence but calculated murder that had failed because I'd spent 3 years learning how toxins present in liquid suspension. I sat on the curb outside Café Valentino, still wearing my apron, hands that wouldn't stop shaking wrapped around my knees. The November wind cut through my thin jacket, but I couldn't seem to make myself move. Couldn't process what had just happened. A black SUV pulled to the curb, sleek, expensive, windows tinted dark enough to be illegal. The back door opened, and Marco stepped out. He'd shed his jacket at some point during the police interviews. His black shirt was rolled to his elbows, gold chain catching afternoon light. He looked tired in a way I hadn't seen before, like adrenaline had finally crashed into exhaustion. Elena. He approached with that same measured grace, knelt so we were eye level. You're in shock. I'm fine. You're shaking. You've been sitting here for 20 minutes. Anthony's been watching you from inside, says you haven't moved since the police finished with your statement. I looked up. Found Anthony visible through the cafe window. Indeed, watching with that predatory awareness. I just need a minute. You need food, water, and somewhere safe to process what happened. Not a suggestion, a statement of fact. My car is warm. I'd like to take you somewhere we can talk. If you're willing. Every instinct screamed that getting into a car with a man I barely knew, a man who was almost certainly involved in organized crime, was the worst possible decision. But my legs were numb from cold. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. And those dark eyes held something I hadn't expected. Genuine concern. Okay, I heard myself say. The SUV's interior smelled like leather and that expensive cologne. Heated seats, tinted windows. The kind of luxury I'd only ever experienced in showrooms I couldn't afford to actually shop in. Anthony drove while Sal, road passenger, both silent, both watching traffic with the same alertness they'd shown in the cafe. Marco sat beside me in the back, close enough that I felt his body heat but not touching, giving me space while ensuring I wasn't alone. Where are we going? My voice came out smaller than intended. Somewhere private. Somewhere we can discuss what happens next. What happens next is I go home, sleep for 12 hours, and try to pretend this morning didn't happen. That's option 1. He pulled out his phone, typed something quickly. Option 2 is you accept that you just saved my life, which creates certain obligations on my part. Obligations I take very seriously. I don't want anything from you. I know. He pocketed the phone, turned those dark eyes on me fully. That's why I'm offering anyway. Elena, you understand what you witnessed today, yes? What Dimitri attempted. He tried to poison you. He tried to kill me in a public place using a method that would have been untraceable if you hadn't recognized the contamination. Which means someone hired him specifically because they knew I frequent your cafe, knew my routine, my preferences, my security protocols. He paused. That kind of intelligence doesn't come cheap, and it doesn't come without consequences. My stomach clenched. You're saying whoever hired him will try again. I'm saying whoever hired him now knows their attempt failed because of you, which makes you a witness. More problematically, it makes you the person who cost them their opportunity. His hand moved like he might touch my shoulder, then stopped. I need to ensure your safety. It's not optional. I can't afford protection. I'm not asking you to pay for it. The SUV pulled into an underground garage beneath a building I didn't recognize. Exclusive downtown address. The kind of place that probably had doormen and marble lobbies and rent that cost more monthly than I made in 6 months. We rode an elevator to the top floor, in silence. When the doors opened, they revealed a penthouse apartment that belonged in architecture magazines. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Chicago's skyline. Minimalist furniture that probably cost more than my entire education. Art on the walls that might have been original. This is your home? The question came out before I could stop it. One of them. Marco gestured to a seating area near the windows. Sit. I'll get you water. I sat because my legs were threatening to give out, sank into a leather sofa that was somehow both firm and comfortable, stared at the city spread below like a promise I'd never be able to keep. Marco returned with water and what looked like expensive whiskey for himself. He settled into the chair across from me, close enough for conversation but not crowding. "Drink," he said, nodding at the water. I drank, realized I was actually desperately thirsty, drained half the glass before setting it down. Better? Marginally. I wrapped my hands around the cool glass. "You're going to tell me I'm in danger now, aren't you? That I need to be careful, watch my back? All the things people say in movies before terrible things happen? Yes. No sugarcoating, no gentle easing into hard truths. Dimitri was hired by someone who wants me dead. That someone will know by tonight that their attempt failed because a barista recognized poison in coffee. They'll want to know how you knew, whether you're connected to me, whether you represent ongoing threat to future attempts. I'm not connected to you. I just make your coffee. You saved my life. That's connection enough." He took a sip of whiskey, the motion deliberate. "I'm going to offer you protection. Not because you owe me anything you don't. Not because I expect anything in return I don't. But because letting you walk back into your life unprotected would guarantee your death within a week. And I don't tolerate civilians being hurt because of my business." The matter of fact, delivery made it worse somehow. Like this was just Tuesday for him. Life and death and casual violence as routine as morning coffee. What kind of protection? Security detail. Discreet but effective. Someone watching your apartment, your commute, your shifts at the café, making sure nobody approaches you with intentions beyond ordering lattes. He leaned forward slightly. "I know this feels invasive. I know you don't want to live like this. But Elena, the alternative is I attend your funeral in a few days because I didn't insist." "How long?" "Until I've identified who ordered the hit and neutralized the threat. Could be days, could be weeks." His expression softened fractionally. "I'll make it as unobtrusive as possible. But it's not negotiable," I should have argued. Should have insisted on independence, on handling my own problems, on not becoming entangled with a man whose world involved poisoned coffee and hired killers. Instead, I heard myself ask, "Who are you? Really?" Silence. Stretched between us, heavy with the weight of truth he'd probably never speak aloud to someone like me. "I'm someone who values loyalty and punishes betrayal," he said finally. "Someone who operates businesses both legitimate and less so. Someone whose family has been part of Chicago's fabric for 4 generations. He met my eyes directly. And someone who just had his life saved by a shy barista with a pharmacy textbook and good instincts. That matters more than you know." "I'm not shy." The corner of his mouth twitched. Almost a smile. "You haven't made eye contact with me for more than 3 seconds until today. You apologize when customers are rude to you. You hide behind that counter like it's armor." He paused. "But you jumped over it without hesitation when you thought someone was in danger. So maybe you're not shy. Maybe you're just waiting for something worth being brave for." The observation landed too close to truths I'd been avoiding for years. "I need to call my dad." "I," said, deflecting. "He'll worry if I don't check in. I always call after my shift." "How is your father?" Not prying, just asking. Like he actually cared about the answer. "He's managing. Car accident 3 years ago left him with chronic pain and disability that makes working difficult. I help with medical bills when I can, which isn't often enough." The words came easier than they should have. "That's why I'm doing the pharmacy tech certification. It pays better than barista work. Not amazing, but enough to actually help instead of just treading water." Marco's expression shifted. Understanding, maybe, or calculation. With him, it was hard to tell the difference. "Make your call," he said, standing. "I'll give you privacy. When you're ready, Anthony will drive you home. And starting tomorrow, you'll have protection whether you notice it or not." He left me alone in his penthouse with city views and expensive furniture and the slowly settling realization that my life had just been permanently altered by recognizing gray tinge in steamed milk. The protection started immediately. I noticed the car outside my apartment building when Anthony dropped me off that evening. Black sedan, tinted windows, parked with a view of my entrance. Discreet but visible enough that I'd know someone was watching. Inside my studio apartment, 4th floor walk-up in Pilsen, tiny but mine, I found my hands were finally steady. The shock had metabolized into something else. Not quite fear, Not quite excitement, something in between that I didn't have words for. My phone rang. Dad's number. "Hey, Papa." "Elena, sweetheart, how was your shift?" His voice carried the familiar rasp from years of smoking he'd quit after the accident. Too late to undo the damage, but at least he'd stopped making it worse. It was eventful. Massive understatement. Something happened at the cafe. Nothing dangerous, I added quickly, before he could spiral. Just unusual. Police were involved, but it's all handled now. Police? The worry in his tone made my chest tight. "Elena, what?" "A customer had a medical issue. I helped. That's all. Everything's fine, I promise." The lie tasted metallic. But the truth, I stopped a Mafia boss from being poisoned, and now I'm under protection from men with guns, would send Dad into panic he couldn't afford. His heart was already compromised from the accident. Stress made everything worse. We talked for 20 minutes about nothing and everything. His physical therapy appointments, my coursework, the neighbor's cat that kept leaving dead mice on his doorstep. Normal conversation that felt like a lifeline to who I'd been this morning before everything changed. "I love you, Papa," I said before hanging up. "Love you more, little star." His childhood nickname for me. Be safe. Always. Another lie, but necessary. I studied until midnight, trying to focus on pharmacokinetics and drug interactions while my brain kept replaying the moment I'd seen, that gray tinge in Marco's cappuccino. The way time had slowed, how my body moved before conscious thought caught up, the sound of ceramic shattering against tile. I'd saved a life today. Someone who might be a criminal, who definitely operated outside normal law, but still a life, still a person who would have died painfully if I'd ignored my instincts. That had to mean something. Around 1 a.m., I gave up on studying and tried to sleep. Lay in my bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to Chicago's nighttime symphony through thin walls. Cars honking, someone's music bleeding through from the apartment below, the ambient white noise of a city that never actually slept. The car was still outside when I checked. Still watching. I should have felt trapped. Should have resented the surveillance, the loss of privacy, the way my choices were being made for me by someone I barely knew. Instead, I felt something I hadn't experienced in 3 years of struggling alone. Safe. Morning arrived with my RAS, alarm screaming at 5:30. I dragged myself through shower, coffee, the mechanical process of preparing for another shift. Checked the window, different car, same position. Protection rotating shifts just like I was. The November cold bit through my jacket during the walk to the L. I caught the red line toward downtown, wedged between morning commuters who smelled like coffee and ambition, and the particular desperation of people who'd rather be anywhere else. That's when I noticed him. Man in his 30s, brown jacket, unremarkable face, standing 3 passengers away, not looking at me directly but maintaining position that kept me in his peripheral vision. My heart rate spiked. Was this Marco's protection or something else? Someone hired to finish what Dimitri started? I got off at my usual stop. Brown jacket followed. Up the stairs, through turnstiles, onto the street where morning light was just starting to paint the buildings gold and gray. He stayed 20 feet back, matching my pace without obvious pursuit. The black sedan from last night was parked near the cafe entrance. As I approached, the driver's door opened, and Sal emerged, his presence immediately more intimidating in morning light. Brown jacket stopped abruptly, pulled out his phone like he'd just remembered an important call, turned, and disappeared back toward the station. Sal watched him go, then nodded at me. "Morning, Miss Rossi. Was that one of yours?" "No." Simple answer that confirmed my fear. "But he's gone now. You'll be safe at work. Marco wants you to know there's additional security inside the cafe today. Be aware but don't be alarmed." I entered Cafe Valentino to find Marcus already there, along with 2 men I didn't recognize sitting at tables with perfect sightlines to the counter and entrance. Not obvious security, they had laptops open, coffee cups, looked like regular customers working remotely. But I saw the way they tracked movement, saw the practiced awareness that marked them as Marco's people. "Elena," Marcus's voice carried relief and concern in equal measure. "You okay after yesterday?" "I'm fine. Scared to make anyone a cappuccino ever again, but fine." He didn't smile. "There are men here. For your protection." I approved it because Marco explained the situation, and I'm not interested in having one of my baristas murdered because she did the right thing. He squeezed my shoulder. "Just do your job. They'll do theirs. The morning rush built with familiar intensity. I made drinks, took orders, smiled at customers who had no idea about yesterday's chaos. The cafe had been thoroughly cleaned, new cups ordered, every surface sanitized like we could somehow sterilize away the violence that had unfolded here. 7:43 arrived. The door opened. Marco entered alone this time. No Anthony, no Sal. Just him in a navy suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. His eyes found mine across the cafe, held for a moment that made my pulse stutter. Then he approached the counter. "Morning, Elena." "Good morning." I reached for a cup. "Your usual?" "Please." He pulled out his wallet, but his attention wasn't on the transaction. "How are you?" "I'm okay." "Your people, there was someone following me this morning, on the train." His expression darkened fractionally. "Sal handled it?" "He scared them off." "Who was it?" "Someone checking to see if you're protected. Now they know." He handed over a 20 for a $4 espresso. "Keep the change." "And Elena?" "Yes?" "Thank you. For yesterday. For trusting your instincts. For being brave enough to act when most people would have stayed silent." His voice dropped lower. "You saved my life. That's not something I take lightly or forget easily." Heat crept up my neck. "I just did what anyone would have done." "No. You did what someone with intelligence, training, and courage would do. Those qualities are rare, especially in combination." He collected his doppio. "I'm sitting at the usual table if you need anything at all." He moved to the back, and I tried to ignore how my hands trembled slightly, preparing the next order. Jen arrived for her shift around 10. Took one look at the security detail scattered through the cafe, then pulled me aside in the back room. "What the hell happened?" She kept her voice low. "Marcus said there was an incident, but wouldn't give details. And now there are very large, very armed men pretending to work on laptops while watching everyone who comes near the counter." I told her. All of it. The poison, the police, Marco's offer of protection, the follower on the train this morning, watching her expression cycle through disbelief, horror, concern, and something that looked uncomfortably like excitement. "You saved a mafia boss's life," she said when I finished. "And now you're under his protection. Elena, this is insane. This is literally a plot from those romance novels you pretend you don't read. It's not romantic. It's terrifying. It can be both." She glanced toward where Marco sat, visible through the doorway. "He's gorgeous. He's powerful. And he's fixated on keeping you safe. That's not nothing. He's keeping me safe because I'm a liability, a witness who can identify what happened. Or he's keeping you safe because you matter to him." Jen squeezed my arm. "Just be careful, okay? Men like that are complicated. And getting actually involved, would change your life in ways you can't predict." I knew she was right. I also knew it was already too late for careful. The week established new patterns. Marco came to the cafe daily, same time, same order. We'd have brief conversations, nothing deep, nothing personal, just small exchanges that felt weighted with subtext I couldn't quite interpret. Protection followed me everywhere. Different faces, same vigilant attention. On the train, near my apartment, lingering in the cafe during my shifts, I learned to identify them by small tells. The way they positioned themselves, how they tracked movement, the subtle communication between rotating details. It should have felt suffocating, should have triggered every independent instinct I'd cultivated during 3 years of surviving alone. Instead, it felt like breathing, like someone had been standing on my chest for years and finally stepped off, letting air flow properly for the first time since Dad's accident had upended everything. Thursday evening, my shift ending at 2, I found Sal waiting outside with the black sedan. "Mr. Lombardi asked if you'd join him for coffee," Sal said. "Not a command, not quite a request. At a different location. He wants to discuss your situation." My situation. Like being under protection from organized crime was just another life circumstance to manage, like student debt or chronic illness. "Does he always send his security to invite people to coffee?" Sal's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Only the ones who saved his life." The drive took 20 minutes, ending at a small cafe in a neighborhood I didn't recognize. Upscale without being ostentatious, the kind of place that served $5 pastries and had actual tablecloths. Marco waited inside, sitting at a corner table with his back to the wall. Same positioning as always, exit visibility, threat assessment, control of the space around him. I slid into the chair across from him, suddenly aware of my work clothes, the smell of espresso that clung to my hair and skin after 6 hours behind the counter. "Thank you for coming," he said. "Did I have a choice?" "Always." His eyes held mine. "I'd never force you into anything, Elena. If you want to leave right now, Sal will drive you home, and we'll pretend this conversation never happened. But I'd prefer if you stayed. There are things we need to discuss." He gestured to the menu. "Order something. Real food, not just coffee. You've been living on caffeine and stress all week." He wasn't wrong. I ordered a sandwich I'd normally consider too expensive, coffee that was somehow better than what I made at Café Valentino, and tried not to fidget under his steady gaze. "The investigation is progressing," Marco said once our orders arrived. "Dmitri was hired by the Kozlov family, Russian operation trying to establish territory in Chicago. They see my businesses as obstacles to expansion. So they tried to kill you. They tried to remove an obstacle. The fact that it's me is secondary to them." He took a sip of coffee. "I've opened negotiations. Explained that attempting murder in broad daylight creates problems that escalate beyond business disagreements. They're considering their position. That's very diplomatic language for something that probably involves violence." His expression shifted. Not quite a smile, but close. "You're observant. I'm terrified and trying to understand what my life looks like now." "Fair." He set down his cup. "Your life looks like this. Protection continues for another 2 weeks minimum while negotiations conclude. During that time, you maintain your routine work, classes, normal activities. My people ensure nobody approaches you with hostile intent. After 2 weeks, assuming the Kozlovs accept terms, you can choose whether to continue protection or return to life without it. What if they don't accept terms? Then protection continues until they do, or until the situation resolves through less diplomatic channels." He paused. "I won't lie to you, Elena. This might get complicated, but I'll keep you safe through all of it. That's a promise." "Why?" The question burst out before I could stop it. "Why do you care this much? I'm just a barista who happened to recognize poison. You don't owe me this level of whatever this is. You saved my life." "You've said that. But people save lives all the time without becoming someone's responsibility. Doctors, paramedics, random bystanders who call 911. They don't get security details and personal assurances from the person they helped." Marco leaned back, studying me with that intensity I'd come to recognize as him calculating responses. "You're right. Most people who save lives don't get this treatment. But most people who save lives aren't targeted by Russian mobsters as a result." He leaned forward again. "You became my responsibility the moment your safety was compromised because of me. That's how this works in my world. You protect your own. I'm not yours. No." Something flickered in his expression. "But you could be." The words hung between us, loaded with meaning I wasn't ready to examine. "I should get home," I said, standing abruptly. "I have studying to do. Sal will drive you." Marco stood as well, moved closer. Close enough that I smelled his cologne, felt the heat of him. "Elena, one more thing. Yes? You did the right thing, saving me, acting on instinct instead of second-guessing yourself. That kind of courage is rare. Don't let anyone, including yourself, convince you otherwise." His hand lifted, almost touched my face, then dropped. "I'll see you tomorrow morning." 7:43. The drive home passed in silence. But my mind wouldn't stop replaying his words. The way he'd looked at me, the implication that I could be his if I wanted. Did I want that? The question followed me into my apartment, through studying I couldn't focus on, into restless sleep where I dreamed of gray-tinged milk and dark eyes that saw too much. I didn't have an answer. But the way my heart raced every morning at 7:43 suggested the question itself might be irrelevant. My body had already decided. Now my brain just needed to catch up. 2 weeks became 3. The Kozlov negotiations stretched with the particular tension of powerful men refusing to yield ground, each day bringing new intelligence reports that Sal would summarize during morning check-ins. "They're posturing," he'd say, standing outside my apartment, building at dawn, testing boundaries, seeing if Marco will blink first. Will he? No. The certainty in Sal's voice should have been comforting. Instead, it reminded me that I'd become leverage in a game I didn't understand, played by people for whom violence was just another negotiating tactic. But life developed a rhythm, despite the underlying threat. I worked my shifts, attended online classes, studied toxicology and pharmaceutical compounds with new appreciation for how knowledge could save lives. Marco came to the cafe daily. Same time, same order. Conversations that started as small talk but gradually deepened into something more substantial. I learned things about him through these exchanges. Small details that accumulated into a fuller picture of who Marco Rossi actually was beneath the tailored suits and quiet authority. His mother had died when he was 16. Cancer that metastasized before anyone recognized the symptoms. His father, the Marco whose name he carried, had run the family businesses until a heart attack 5 years ago left the son inheriting an empire he'd never wanted but couldn't abandon. I studied engineering, he told me one morning during a rare moment when the cafe was quiet. MIT had offers from tech companies, legitimate ones. Could have built something clean. He stirred his espresso, the motion meditative. Then Dad collapsed during a meeting. By the time the ambulance arrived, he was gone. And suddenly I was responsible for 200 people whose livelihoods depended on businesses I'd spent my whole life trying to escape. Why didn't you walk away? Sell everything? Take the money? Build that clean life? Because walking away would have created a power vacuum. Someone would have filled it, probably violently, and all those people who depended on my father's protection would have been caught in the crossfire. His dark eyes met mine. Sometimes the responsible choice is accepting responsibilities you never wanted. I understood that better than he knew. Dad's accident, the medical bills, the way my entire life had pivoted from college student with dreams to coffee shop worker with debt. How sometimes survival meant sacrificing who you wanted to be for who circumstances demanded. Do you regret it? I asked. Taking over? Every day. Honest. Unflinching. And not at all. It's complicated. Complicated seems to be your default setting. His mouth quirked. You're not intimidated by me at all anymore, are you? Should I be? Most people are. I'm not most people. I wiped down the counter even though it was already clean. Besides, you've seen me at my worst covered in spilled cappuccino, having a panic attack in your penthouse, jumping over counters like some kind of deranged action hero. Hard to maintain intimidation after that. That wasn't your worst. Something shifted in his expression. That was you being brave. There's a difference. The compliment settled into my chest, warm and unwelcome. I'd been carefully maintaining distance, reminding myself that Marco Rossi was a client under protection, nothing more. That the way my pulse jumped when he walked through the door was just adrenaline from sustained stress. But my body kept betraying my carefully constructed logic. The way I'd started checking the time around 7:40, anticipating his arrival. How I'd catch myself watching him at his usual table, studying the way he moved, the rare moments when his guard dropped enough to smile. Jen noticed, of course. You're falling for him, she said during a closing shift 2.5 weeks after the poisoning. We were alone in the cafe, counting registers while Marco's security detail lingered outside. Don't deny it. I've known you too long to not see what's happening. I'm not falling for anyone. I'm just adapting to unusual circumstances. Elena, you light up when he walks in. Your whole energy changes. And the way he looks at you? She whistled softly. That man is gone. Absolutely gone. Whatever this is between you two, it's not just protective custody. It can't be anything more than that. I slammed the register drawer harder than necessary. He's a criminal, Jen. A nice one, maybe, who tips well and speaks 5 languages and somehow makes organized crime sound like a complicated business degree, but still a criminal. Getting involved would be insane, and yet you're already involved. She leaned against the counter, studying me with uncomfortable intensity. The question isn't whether you want this. The question is whether you're brave enough to admit you do. I went home that night with her words circling my mind like birds of prey, waiting for me to acknowledge the truth I'd been avoiding. Yes, I was falling for Marco Rossi. Yes, it was probably the worst possible decision I could make. Yes, I was going to do it anyway. The shift happened on a Thursday. 3 weeks and 2 days after the poisoning, I was leaving the cafe. Through the back entrance, still stupid. Still the fastest route despite Sal's repeated warnings about using front exits with better visibility. My guard for the evening was Anthony, who maintained his usual 20-foot following distance as I navigated the alley toward the street. The van came from nowhere. No engine noise, no warning, just sudden movement and hands grabbing my arms with bruising force. I opened my mouth to scream, but something pressed against my face, cloth, chemical smell, the world tilting sideways as my legs stopped cooperating. Chloroform. Some distant part of my brain registered. Classic abduction technique. Causes unconsciousness in 30 to 60 seconds depending on concentration and body weight. I tried to fight. Tried to employ the self-defense tactics I'd learned from YouTube videos during late-night anxiety spirals. But my limbs felt heavy, disconnected, like they belonged to someone else. Then gunfire exploded through the alley. Sharp, deafening, cracks that made my ears ring even through the chemical fog. The hands released me. I hit pavement hard, tasted copper from where I'd bitten my lip. More gunfire, shouting in Russian and English, the screech of tires. Anthony was suddenly there, pulling me up, half carrying me toward the black sedan that had materialized at the alley's entrance. Sal behind the wheel, engine already running. Go, go, go! Anthony shoved me into the back seat, piled in after, slammed the door as Sal hit the gas. The world blurred past windows. My head felt stuffed with cotton, thoughts moving through molasses. The chloroform was still in my system, making coherent thought difficult. Elena. Anthony's voice seemed to come from far away. Stay awake. Talk to me. What's your full name? Elena. Rossi. No. Wait. Rossi is. That's not right. I blinked hard, trying to clear the fog. Russo. Elena Russo. But you knew that. Why are you asking questions, you know? Keeping you conscious. Who's the president? I answered his questions on autopilot while my brain slowly cleared. Adrenaline burning through the chemical haze. By the time we pulled up to Marco's building, not the penthouse I'd visited before, but a different high-rise with underground parking, I could mostly think straight. Mostly. Enough to understand what had just happened. The Kozlovs had tried to take me. Would have succeeded if Anthony hadn't been there. Hadn't responded fast enough to prevent me being thrown into that van. Sal and Anthony flanked me through the parking garage, into an elevator that required a key card, up to a floor that was apparently entirely Marco's. The doors opened directly into a space that was part fortress, part home concrete and bulletproof glass mixed with leather furniture and that same minimalist aesthetic from the penthouse. Marco was waiting. The second the elevator doors opened, and he saw me disheveled, bloodied lip, still unsteady on my feet, his expression transformed into something I'd never seen before. Rage. Pure, cold, absolutely lethal rage barely contained beneath civilized veneer. Who? Single word. Directed at Anthony while Marco's hands were already on me, checking for injuries with the kind of efficient gentleness that suggested medical training. Kozlov's men. 3 of them. 2 in the van. 1 driving. They had chloroform, zip ties, looked like planned abduction. Anthony's voice stayed level despite the blood splattered across his jacket. I eliminated the 2 in the alley. Driver escaped, but Sal got the plate number. Run it. Find them. Find everyone connected to this. Marco's hands cupped my face, tilting it up so my eyes met his. The rage was still there, but underneath was something else. Fear. Elena, are you hurt? I'm okay. Scared, but okay. My voice came out shakier than intended. They used chloroform. I remember learning about it in pharmacology causes rapid onset unconsciousness. Metabolizes quickly, relatively safe, if not used at high concentrations for extended. Elena. Gentle interruption. You're in shock. Let's get you sitting down. He guided me to a sofa, disappeared, returned with water and what looked like a first aid kit, cleaned the cut on my lip with antiseptic that stung, checked my pupils for signs of concussion, kept asking questions to assess my cognitive function. How many fingers? 3. What day is it? Thursday, November 21st. You're stalling while someone tracks down the people who tried to kidnap me. I pushed his hand away gently. I'm fine, Marco. Shaken up, but fine. Anthony saved me before they could actually take me. They shouldn't have gotten close enough to try. His jaw was tight enough that I saw muscle jump beneath skin. This is my fault. I underestimated their desperation. Thought negotiations were working when they were just biding time. Planning this. It's not your fault that someone tried to kidnap me. It's absolutely my fault. He stood, paced to the windows overlooking Chicago's nighttime sprawl. You were targeted because of me, because you saved my life and became valuable as leverage. Every second you've been in danger these past 3 weeks is my responsibility. I chose to save you. Nobody forced me to knock that cup from your hand, and I chose to accept that gift instead of insisting you disappear from my life immediately. He turned back, and the expression on his face made my chest tight. I should have put you somewhere completely secure the moment I understood the Kozlovs were involved. Instead, I let you continue working. Maintained normal routines because you asked for independence. That almost got you taken tonight. So what now? I stood, legs steadier than they'd been minutes ago. You lock me in a fortress somewhere until the scary Russians accept your terms? I become a prisoner for my own safety? If that's what it takes to keep you alive. No. The word came out harder than intended. I won't live like that. I spent 3 years barely surviving, working myself to exhaustion just to stay ahead of debt I'll never escape. I'm not trading that cage for a different one, even if this one has bulletproof windows and Italian marble. Elena. You said I had a choice. That you'd never force me into anything. Were you lying? Silence stretched between us, heavy with tension that had nothing to do with attempted kidnapping, and everything to do with the truth we'd been circling for weeks. No, he said finally. I wasn't lying. But asking you to choose between safety and freedom isn't fair when one option leads to your death. Life isn't fair. You said that yourself. Sometimes the responsible choice is accepting responsibilities you never wanted. I moved closer, close enough to see the gold flecks in his dark eyes. I'm choosing to stay in my life. To keep working, keep studying, keep existing as myself. But I need you to respect that choice even when it terrifies you. It does terrify me. His hand came up, touched my face with gentleness that contrasted sharply with the violence he was clearly contemplating. The thought of them taking you, hurting you, using you against me, Elena, I can't, then end it. Simple solution. Impossible solution. Finish your negotiations or start your war or do whatever it takes to eliminate the threat. But don't ask me to stop living while you do. His thumb traced my cheekbone. The touch sent electricity down my spine despite everything that had happened tonight. You're the bravest person I've ever met, he said quietly, and the most stubborn. I learned from someone with experience in both. The almost smile that crossed his face disappeared quickly, replaced by the cold calculation I'd seen before. He pulled out his phone, made a call that lasted 30 seconds, then pocketed it and turned back to me. You're staying here tonight. Tomorrow, we're implementing enhanced security protocols, different routes to work, varied schedules, additional protection detail. You want to maintain your life? Fine. But you do it my way, or not at all. Non-negotiable. Okay. Surprise flickered across his expression. Okay. I'm not stupid, Marco. I know tonight was close. Too close. If enhanced security means I can still work and study and not feel like I'm suffocating, then yes. Okay. Relief softened his features fractionally. I'll show you to a guest room. You'll have privacy, your own space. But you're not leaving this building until morning when we have proper arrangements in place. The guest room was larger than my entire apartment. King bed, attached bathroom with a tub that could fit 3 people, floor-to-ceiling windows with a view that made Chicago look like a constellation fallen to earth. Marco provided clothes, soft cotton that smelled like expensive detergent, several sizes too large but comfortable. Left me alone to shower and process while he presumably made whatever arrangements were necessary to ensure I survived the next attempt on my freedom. I stood under water hot enough to scald, scrubbing away the chemical smell of chloroform and the memory of hands grabbing me in darkness. Let myself shake, let the fear I'd been suppressing flood through until it metabolized into something else. Determination. I wouldn't let the Kozlovs or anyone else make me small. Wouldn't surrender the life I'd been building just because powerful men had decided I was useful leverage. If Marco wanted to protect me, fine. But I'd protect myself too, starting with finishing my pharmacy certification and getting a job that paid well enough to hire my own security if necessary. Morning arrived with weak November sunlight and the smell of coffee. I followed the scent to find Marco in his kitchen, already dressed for the day in dark slacks and a white shirt, making espresso with the kind of expensive home machine I'd only ever seen in specialty stores. Sleep okay? He asked without turning. Surprisingly, yes. That bed is more comfortable than my entire apartment. I settled onto a bar stool at the kitchen island. What time is it? 6:30. I took the liberty of calling Marcus and explaining you'd be late for your shift. He was understanding. Marco pulled a second espresso, handed it to me. How do you feel? Sore. My arms have bruises from where they grabbed me, but otherwise fine. I sipped the espresso, perfect temperature, perfect strength. You make good coffee for someone who usually has other people make it for him. I learned from the best barista in Chicago. The compliment made heat creep up my neck. What's the plan? Varied schedule at the cafe, different start times each day, changed randomly. You'll have minimum 2 security personnel visible at all times, more if threat assessment demands it. New apartment with better security, which I'm covering before you argue. Marco, I can't let you. You can, and you will. Firm, but not harsh. Your current place is a 4th-floor walk-up with locks a determined teenager could bypass. The building I have in mind has doormen, security cameras, electronic access control. Consider it a loan if that makes you more comfortable, but you're moving. Today? The Kozlovs know where you live. They proved last night they're willing to escalate to abduction. Staying in that apartment is suicide. He set down his espresso, moved around the island until he was standing close enough that I felt his body heat. Elena, please, let me do this. Let me keep you safe in ways that don't require you giving up your independence. The please did it. That single word from a man who probably never asked for anything, just took or commanded. Okay, I heard myself agree. But I'm paying you back. Eventually. When I finish my certification and get a better job. This is a loan, not charity. Whatever makes you comfortable. He touched my hand briefly. There's something else we need to discuss. Last night when you were in danger, I realized something I've been avoiding acknowledging. My pulse picked up. What? That this stopped being just protection weeks ago. His eyes held mine. That somewhere between poisoned coffee and late-night conversations at closing time, you became more than a responsibility. More than someone I'm obligated to shield from consequences of saving my life. Marco, let me finish. He took a breath. I'm not good at this. Feelings. Emotional honesty. Anything that isn't business or strategy. My world doesn't leave much room for vulnerability. But you make me want to try anyway. Make me want to be more than what my father's legacy demands. The raw honesty in his voice made my chest tight. I feel it too, I whispered. Have been feeling it and trying to pretend I wasn't because getting involved with you seemed like the worst possible decision. You're dangerous and complicated and part of a world I don't understand. But you see me. Really see me. Not just the shy barista. Behind the counter, you respect my choices even when they scare you. You make me feel brave instead of small. I swallowed hard. And somewhere between morning espressos and attempted kidnappings, I fell for you despite every logical reason not to. The smile that crossed his face was genuine. Unguarded, transforming his features from intimidating to almost boyish. This won't be easy, he said. My life, my business, the threats that come with both, none of it is conducive to normal relationships. I don't want normal. Normal is boring. Normal is predictable. Normal is what I've been trying to escape since Dad's accident derailed every plan I'd made. I stood, eliminated the distance between us until we were close enough that I had to tilt my head to maintain eye contact. I want complicated. I want you. He kissed me then, slow and deliberate, one hand cupping my face while the other pressed against the small of my back, pulling me closer. The kiss tasted like espresso and promise, like decisions that couldn't be unmade and consequences I'd accept anyway. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. I'm still terrified of you getting hurt because of me, he said quietly. I'm terrified too, but I'm done letting fear make my decisions. I traced the line of his jaw. Besides, I saved your life once. If danger comes again, I'll just have to save it again. You're ridiculous. You're one to talk. We stood there in his kitchen with morning light streaming through windows. Two people from completely different worlds who'd somehow found common ground in poisoned cappuccinos and mutual stubbornness. It wouldn't be easy. The Kozlov still needed handling. My life still needed protecting. And the fundamental reality of Marco's world wouldn't change just because we'd admitted feelings for each other. But standing there in his arms, I felt something I hadn't experienced in 3 years. Hope. The next week unfolded with controlled chaos. Marco's people moved my belongings to a new apartment in a secured building downtown. 2 bedrooms, actual security, rent that made me dizzy until Marco reminded me firmly that he was covering it as a loan, and I could start repayment whenever my financial situation allowed. The cafe implemented new security protocols. My schedule varied daily, sometimes opening, sometimes mid-shift, making patterns harder to establish. Anthony or Sal accompanied me everywhere. Close enough to intervene but discreet enough that customers rarely noticed. And Marco stopped pretending our relationship was purely protective. He'd arrive at the café during my shifts, claim his usual table, and we'd steal moments between rush periods, quick conversations that built into something deeper, shared looks that communicated more than words, the particular intimacy that came from surviving danger together. Evenings I spent at his place, not the fortified apartment from the night of the attempted kidnapping, but the original penthouse with city views. We'd make dinner together, his pasta technique against my total lack of culinary skill resulting in meals that were either excellent or entertainingly disastrous. "How did you burn water?" he asked one evening, staring at a pot that had somehow scorched despite containing liquid. "It's a gift. Years of practice." He pulled me away from the stove with gentle authority. "You focus on studying. I'll handle food before you burn down my kitchen." I studied while he cooked. Pharmaceutical compounds and drug interactions spread across his granite countertops, occasionally asking questions that led to discussions about chemistry and business ethics, and the complicated ways knowledge could be used for healing or harm. "You could do more than pharmacy tech," Marco said one evening while I reviewed pharmacokinetics. "Your understanding of molecular interactions is graduate level. Have you considered actual pharmacy school?" "I've considered it. Can't afford it. Can barely afford the certification program, and that's online with flexible deadlines." I highlighted a passage about drug metabolism. "Pharmacy school requires full-time commitment I can't make while working enough to live." "What if money wasn't an obstacle?" I looked up from my textbook. "Are you offering to pay for pharmacy school?" "I'm suggesting that barriers preventing you from achieving potential should be addressed, whether that's through loans, scholarships, or other means." He set a plate of pasta in front of me. "You saved my life, Elena. The least I can do is help you build the one you want." I'm already accepting too much help. New apartment, security detail, this arrangement where I spend more time here than at my own place. Because you want to be here. Because we're building something together. He sat across from me. "This isn't charity. This is partnership. You've given me something I didn't know I needed. Let me give you the same." "What have I given you?" "A reason to be more than what my legacy demands. You make me want to be better, do better, find ways to use power that don't just perpetuate violence." His hand covered mine. "That's worth more than tuition money or apartment rent. That's worth everything." The sincerity in his voice made my eyes sting. "I'll think about it," I said. "The pharmacy school thing. After I finish this certification and know whether I'm actually capable of the work." "You're capable of anything you decide to attempt." Simple statement of fact. I've watched you master organic chemistry while working full-time and dealing with Russian mobsters trying to kidnap you. If that doesn't prove capability, nothing does. The Kozlov situation resolved 3 weeks and 5 days after the poisoning attempt. Not through diplomacy, not through negotiated terms and careful boundary establishment, through the kind of decisive action that reminded me exactly who Marco Rossi was beneath the gentle hands and Italian cooking. He told me about it the next morning, sitting in his kitchen with espresso, and the particular weariness that came from sleepless nights handling problems I didn't want details about. "It's over," he said. "The Kozlovs have withdrawn their expansion attempts. There will be no further threats to your safety from that direction." "How did you convince them?" "Elena. I'm not asking for details. Just, did people die? Because of me? Because I saved your life and became valuable as leverage?" He was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of choices made in darkness. "Yes, people died. Not innocent people, soldiers who'd made careers of violence, who knew the risks of escalating conflicts. But yes, there was death. There always is in my world when negotiations fail. And if I'd let you drink that poisoned cappuccino? If you'd died that day? There would have been different deaths, different violence. The outcome wouldn't have been better. Just different." He reached across the table, took my hand. "You didn't create this situation. You interrupted it. Everything that followed was consequence of choices made by people who've been playing this game longer than you've been alive. I wanted to feel guilty, wanted to carry the weight of whatever violence had occurred to end the Kozlov threat. But the truth was more complicated than simple guilt. Marco was alive because I'd recognized poison. I was alive because he'd protected me from retaliation. And yes, others had died, but they'd died in a world that operated by rules I didn't make and couldn't change. All I could control was my own choices going forward. "Okay," I said finally. "It's over. We move forward. We move forward." Relief softened his features. And you can reduce security protocols. Anthony will still accompany you occasionally, but the immediate threat has passed. You can reclaim more. Normally. The concept felt foreign after a month of living under protection, of hyper-awareness, and constant vigilance, and measuring every decision against potential danger. But as morning light painted the kitchen in shades of gold, with Marco's hand warm around mine and coffee steaming between us, I realized something fundamental. I didn't want normal. I wanted this. Complicated, dangerous, built on foundations that would never be simple or safe, or easily explained to people outside this world. I wanted morning espressos and late-night chemistry discussions and a man who'd burned down half of Chicago's Russian operations to keep me safe. I wanted Marco Rossi in all his contradictory complexity. And somehow, miraculously, I had him. 6 months compressed into moments that felt both fast and infinite. Winter gave way to spring, Chicago thawing from its frozen brutality into something almost beautiful. I finished my pharmacy technician certification in March with scores high. Enough that my instructor suggested pharmacy school wasn't just possible but probable. Marco celebrated by taking me to dinner at a restaurant so exclusive it didn't have a name. Just a door number and a chef who'd apparently won awards I'd never heard of. "I'm proud of you," he said over dessert that looked too beautiful to eat. "You worked for this while dealing with impossible circumstances. That kind of determination is rare." I had help. Hard to fail when your boyfriend owns half the city and ensures you have everything you need. "Your boyfriend," he repeated, smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Is that what I am? What would you prefer? Partner in complicated situations? The man I share expensive dinners with? Criminal I'm romantically involved with? All of the above." He reached across the table, took my hand. "But boyfriend works. Surprisingly normal for such abnormal circumstances." April brought job offers, 3 different pharmacies interested in hiring me, all offering better pay than Café Valentino could ever match. I gave Marcus 2 weeks' notice with gratitude and guilt in equal measure. "You're moving up," he said when I explained. "That's how it should be. Though I'll miss having you behind the counter. I'll miss being here, but I need to move forward. Build something beyond survival." "You already have." He hugged me with the familiar warmth of someone who'd been present through the worst period of my life. "Just remember where you started when you're dispensing medications and making real money." I promised I would. My new job started in May at a pharmacy in a neighborhood that bordered both Marco's territory and legitimate business districts. The work was challenging, calculating dosages, managing inventories, counseling patients about drug interactions while drawing on all that textbook knowledge I'd accumulated. Marco would visit sometimes during lunch breaks, bringing food and conversation and the particular comfort of someone who understood both versions of me, the professional working toward respectable career, and the woman who'd saved his life with instincts trained on pharmaceutical compounds. "How's the job?" he asked one afternoon in June, meeting me at a park near the pharmacy. "Exhausting. Fascinating. I spent 40 minutes this morning explaining to an elderly woman why she couldn't take her blood pressure medication with grapefruit juice because of CYP3A4 enzyme interactions. I bit into the sandwich he'd brought. She called me brilliant. Felt good. "You are brilliant." Simple statement, like he was commenting on weather. "Always have been. Now other people are noticing too. Because you gave me space to prove it. You proved it yourself. I just provided security while you did." We sat in comfortable silence, watching Chicago move around us. Business people on lunch breaks, parents with strollers, the constant motion of a city that never quite stopped. "I've been thinking," Marco said, eventually, "about next steps. Where this relationship goes beyond expensive dinners and your apartment, that's nicer than most penthouses." My pulse picked up. "What kind of next steps?" "The kind where you move into my place permanently instead of maintaining 2 residences. Where we stop pretending this is casual, when it stopped being casual the moment you knocked poison from my hand." He turned to face me fully. "Where I stop calling you my girlfriend, and start calling you my partner in every sense of the word. You're asking me to move in with you? I'm asking you to build a life with me. Complicated, definitely. Dangerous sometimes, probably. But ours, completely ours." His hand found mine. No pressure. "Take time to think about, yes." He blinked. "Yes? Yes. I'll move in with you. Yes. I want to build something that's ours. Yes to all of it." I squeezed his hand. "I stopped playing it safe the day I saved your life. Not going to start again now." The smile that crossed His face was pure joy, unguarded in ways I rarely saw from him. "You're sure?" "Completely. Though I'm keeping my apartment for another month, just in case you turn out to be a terrible roommate who leaves dishes in the sink. I'll hire someone to do dishes if that's your only concern." "Of course you will." We kissed in that park with Chicago moving around us. Two people who'd built something improbable from poisoned cappuccinos and mutual stubbornness. It wouldn't always be easy. Marco's world still carried dangers I was learning to navigate, and my determination to maintain independence sometimes clashed with his protective instincts. But we'd figure it out. Together. Because that's what partners did. 1 year after I'd knocked poison from Marco's hand, we stood in that same café, now under different management. Marcus having retired to Florida, ordering coffee like normal people instead of criminals and their accidentally heroic baristas. "Doppio espresso," Marco told the new barista, a kid who couldn't be older than 20. "And whatever she wants." "Cappuccino," I said. "Extra dry." The kid made our drinks with the careful attention of someone new to the craft. When he handed over my cappuccino, I examined it with the practiced eye of someone who'd once saved a life by noticing wrong color in steamed milk. Perfect white foam. Proper layering. No gray tinge indicating contamination. "Good?" Marco asked, watching me inspect the drink. "Perfect." I took a sip. "Just coffee. No attempted murder. That's progress. You have very low bars for what constitutes progress. I saved your life and fell in love with you. Everything after that is just bonus content." We found a table near the windows, not the back, where he used to sit with strategic positioning, just a normal table with good light. Drank our coffee like normal people who hadn't built a relationship on attempted assassination and Russian mobsters. "Thank you," Marco said eventually. "For what?" "For being brave enough to act on instinct. For trusting me when you had every reason not to. For choosing to stay when most people would have run." His hand covered mine. "For making me want to be more than what I inherited. Thank you for respecting my choices even when they terrified you. For protecting without possessing. For seeing potential I'd stopped believing existed." I traced the line of his jaw with my free hand. "For making me brave instead of small. We're very good at thanking each other. We're very good at a lot of things." He kissed me across the table while the barista pretended not to. Watch. While morning light painted Chicago in shades of possibility. 1 year ago, I'd been a shy barista trying to survive on minimum wage and pharmaceutical textbooks. Now I was a pharmacy technician with a career trajectory, a man I loved who understood all my complicated parts, and a future that looked nothing like what I'd imagined but somehow better than anything I'd planned. All because I'd recognized gray tinge in steamed milk and acted before thinking. Sometimes the best decisions were the ones that bypassed logic entirely. Sometimes courage looked like jumping over counters to slap poison from dangerous hands. Sometimes love grew in the space between protection and partnership, built on mutual respect and shared survival. And sometimes the most complicated relationship was exactly the right one, not despite its dangers, but because of them. Because they'd forced both of us to become more than we'd been alone. I'd chosen Marco Rossi despite every logical reason not to, and he'd chosen me right back. That choice made all the difference. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.